25 Italian immigrant dinners cooked in American kitchens, from uova in purgatorio to braciole simmered in Sunday gravy. Forget chicken Alfredo and breadsticks. This was the real food that fed 4 million Italians who arrived between 1880 and 1920. They cooked on coal stoves in tenement kitchens, barely wide enough for 2 people to stand. And from that, they built a cuisine, richer, heavier, layered with cheese and simmered with pork. Some of these dishes you may recognize, others have nearly disappeared. Uova in purgatorio, eggs poached directly in a pan of simmering tomato sauce. That was uova in purgatorio. The name translates to eggs in purgatory, and it came from Naples, where home cooks made it when the pantries held little else. In American tenements, it became a weeknight staple. A woman crushed canned tomatoes into a cast-iron skillet, added sliced garlic and crushed red pepper, and let the sauce bubble on low heat until it thickened. She created small wells in the sauce with the back of a wooden spoon. Then she cracked eggs directly into those wells, covered the skillet with a lid, and waited until the whites set. But the yolks stayed soft and runny. The whole process took less than 20 minutes. The dish required no meat, no expensive cheese. A loaf of crusty bread for dipping completed the meal. 10 cents for eggs, 5 cents for tomatoes, about $2 today. Who remembers their grandmother making this on a cold weeknight? As American families moved to the suburbs and kitchens filled with convenience foods, quick skillet suppers like this faded from the weekly rotation, but in some Italian-American households, it never left the table. The next dish also started with a pan of sauce, but what went inside changed everything. Braciole in Sunday gravy, thin slices of beef, pounded flat, rolled around a filling of breadcrumbs, garlic, parsley, and grated cheese. That was braciole. Each roll was tied with kitchen string, browned in a heavy pot, then simmered in tomato sauce for hours. In southern Italy, braciole appeared only at celebrations. In America, it became the centerpiece of Sunday dinner. A woman spread filling across each pounded slice, rolled them tightly, tied them at both ends, and browned the rolls in olive oil. She added crushed tomatoes, a bay leaf, and a splash of red wine. The braise continued on low heat for 2 to 3 hours. The sauce was never wasted. Families ladled it over pasta as a first course, then served the sliced meat as a second. A pound of bottom round cost about 15 cents in 1910, roughly $4.50 today. As fewer home cooks had time for all-day braises, Sunday dinner shortened. The braciole pot sat unused, but some dishes from the Sunday table required no hours of simmering, just a hot skillet and a handful of clams. Linguine with white clam sauce, fresh clams, garlic, white wine, olive oil and parsley, tossed with hot linguine and nothing more. This was linguine with white clam sauce, and it came from the Neapolitan coast. In New York, Italian immigrants found clams, cheap and plentiful, at the Fulton Fish Market. A woman scrubbed the shells clean, steamed them open in a covered pot, then sautéed minced garlic in olive oil until it turned golden. She added the clam liquor, a splash of wine, and let it reduce. The cooked clams went back in at the end, just long enough to warm through. The dish appeared on Friday tables during Lent and on any night when meat was scarce. A dozen little neck clams cost about 10 cents, around $3 today. In 1907, a study of New York tenements noted that Italian families spent over 50% of their income on food, compared to just 30% for native-born Americans. As fresh seafood became harder to source outside coastal cities, and as supermarkets replaced neighborhood fish markets, white clam sauce grew rare in home kitchens. The next dish also came from the Friday tradition, but it swapped the sea for the garden. pasta e ceci, chickpeas simmered with garlic, rosemary, and tomatoes, then mixed with short pasta. That was pasta e ceci. In Rome, it was peasant food. In American tenements, it was a Friday staple when meat was forbidden and fish was too expensive. A woman soaked dried chickpeas overnight, then simmered them for hours until they turned creamy. She mashed half of them into the broth to thicken it, left the rest whole for texture. Short pasta, ditalini or broken spaghetti, cooked directly in the pot, absorbing the starchy liquid. A pound of dried chickpeas cost about 5 cents. The entire pot fed a family for less than 15 cents, under $4 today. As canned chickpeas and prepared soups filled grocery shelves, the all-day soak and simmer fell out of favor. But when Friday gave way to Saturday, the real cooking began, and no dish announced the weekend like the next one on our list. Chicken cacciatore, chicken pieces browned in olive oil, then braised with tomatoes, onions, bell peppers, and herbs. That was chicken cacciatore. The name means hunter style, and it came from the Italian countryside, where cooks prepared whatever game the hunters brought home. In America, chicken replaced rabbit or pheasant. A woman cut a whole bird into pieces, seasoned it with salt and pepper, and browned each piece in a wide skillet until the skin turned golden. She removed the chicken, softened sliced onions and peppers in the same pan, added crushed tomatoes, a bay leaf, and a splash of wine if she had it, then nissaled the chicken back into the sauce. The lid went on, and the braise continued for an hour or more until the meat nearly fell from the bone. Did your family serve this over polenta or with crusty bread? As whole chicken cost about 25 cents in 1915, approximately $7.50 today, the braising method transformed even older, tougher birds into something tender. As rotisserie chickens and boneless breasts took over American kitchens, whole bird cooking declined. The cacciatore pot gathered dust. The next dish also stretched a single protein across an entire table, but it came from the butcher's scraps. Tripe in tomato sauce, the honeycomb lining of a cow's stomach, simmered for hours in a garlicky tomato sauce. That was tripe. In Italy, it was poor man's food. In American tenement kitchens, it remained exactly that. A woman soaked the tripe in salted water, scrubbed it clean with a brush, then cut it into thin strips. She browned onions and garlic in a heavy pot, added the tripe, poured in crushed tomatoes, and let the entire mixture simmer on low heat for 3 to 4 hours until the tripe had turned tender and absorbed the sauce. Some cooks added a bay leaf or a pinch of oregano. Tripe cost almost nothing. Butchers often gave it away to anyone who asked. Even at its most expensive, it ran about 5 cents a pound. The finished dish stretched to feed a large family. By 1910, over 2 million Italians lived in New York City alone, more than in Venice, Florence, and Genoa combined. As second and third generations moved up economically, organ meats lost their appeal. Tripe became something grandmothers made, then something no one made at all. But offal was not the only way immigrants stretched a meal. Vegetables did the same work, and none more so than the next dish, escarole and beans. Bitter escarole greens wilted in garlic and olive oil, then simmered with white cannellini beans. That was scarola e fagioli. In Naples, it was peasant food. In America, it was a complete meal. A woman trimmed the escarole, washed it in several changes of water, and chopped it roughly. She heated olive oil in a wide pot, added sliced garlic, and cooked it until golden. The wet escarole went in next. The water clinging to the leaves created steam. Once the greens wilted, she added cooked beans and enough broth to make it soupy. The dish required no meat. A head of escarole cost about 3 cents. A pound of dried beans cost 5. The entire pot fed a family for less than 15 cents total, under $4 today. As American produce aisles shrank their selection of bitter greens, and as canned soups replaced homemade escarole and beans became a regional memory, some families still make it every Christmas Eve. Do you? The next dish, you also built a meal from vegetables and starch, but it came from northern Italy, not the south. Polenta with sausage and peppers. Cornmeal stirred slowly into boiling water until it thickened into a golden porridge. That was polenta. Topped with browned sausage links and sautéed bell peppers, it became a complete meal. In northern Italy, polenta replaced bread as the daily starch. Immigrants from the Veneto and Friuli brought the tradition to America, where cornmeal was cheap and plentiful. A woman brought salted water to a boil, then poured in cornmeal in a slow stream while stirring constantly. She stirred for 30 to 40 minutes, scraping the bottom of the pot to prevent scorching, until the polenta pulled away from the sides. Meanwhile, sausage links browned in a separate skillet alongside sliced peppers. A pound of cornmeal cost about 4 cents. Italian sausage ran about 12 cents a pound. The entire meal cost less than 25 cents, around $7 today. As quick cooking polenta appeared in stores, and as rice and potatoes dominated American tables, the slow-stirred version became rare. But cornmeal was not the only starch Italian women shaped by hand. The next dish required something far more delicate. Homemade ravioli in broth. Small pillows of pasta dough filled with ricotta and spinach, then floated in clear chicken broth. That was ravioli in brodo. It appeared at holidays, weddings, and on Sundays when the family had the time. A woman mixed flour and eggs into a smooth dough, kneaded it until elastic, then rolled it thin with a wooden pin. She spooned mounds of filling onto the sheet, folded the dough over, pressed around each mound to seal, and cut individual ravioli with a pastry wheel. The finished parcels rested on a flour-dusted cloth until the broth came to a simmer. The process took hours. Grandmothers and daughters worked side by side. A batch required about 30 cents worth of ingredients, $9 today. Between 1890 and 1920, Italian immigrants sent over $200 million back to relatives in Italy, often sacrificing meat at their own tables to do so. As frozen ravioli filled American kitchens, handmade versions became rare outside holiday tables. The next dish also featured stuffed pasta, but these parcels never touched broth. Baked manicotti, large pasta tubes filled with seasoned ricotta, lined in a baking dish, covered with tomato sauce and mozzarella, then baked until bubbling. That was manicotti. In Italy, cooks made similar dishes with crepes. In America, the tubular pasta version became standard. A woman boiled the manicotti shells until just pliable, drained them carefully to prevent tearing, then piped or spooned ricotta filling, seasoned with egg, parsley, and parmesan into each tube. She spread sauce on the bottom of an enamel baking pan, arranged the stuffed shells in a single layer, covered them with more sauce and sliced mozzarella, and slid the pan into a hot oven. The dish baked until the cheese turned golden and the sauce bubbled at the edges. Did your mother make these for Christmas Eve dinner? The dish required time, but not expensive ingredients. Ricotta cost about 10 cents a pound. A pan of manicotti for 8 cost under 40 cents total, around $12 today. As women entered the workforce and cooking time shrank, labor-intensive dishes like manicotti became reserved for holidays. Eventually, many families stopped making them entirely. But not every baked pasta required stuffing individual tubes. The next dish took a simpler approach: baked ziti with meat sauce, Tubular ziti pasta tossed with a slow simmered meat sauce, layered with ricotta and mozzarella, then baked until the top turned golden and crispy. That was baked ziti. It fed crowds at church suppers, family gatherings, and Sunday dinners throughout Italian-American neighborhoods. A woman started by browning ground beef or crumbled sausage in a wide pot. She added crushed tomatoes, garlic, and dried oregano, then let the sauce simmer for at least an hour. Meanwhile, the ziti boiled until just shy of tender. She mixed the pasta with the sauce, spread half in a baking dish, dotted it with spoonfuls of ricotta, added the remaining pasta, topped everything with sliced mozzarella, and baked it until the cheese melted and browned at the edges. A pound of ground beef cost about 12 cents in 1915. The entire dish ran under 50 cents, approximately $15 today. As takeout Italian restaurants spread across America, homemade baked pasta declined. Ordering in became easier than baking. The next dish was even more forgiving, and it started not with meat, but with whatever vegetables the garden provided. Minestrone soup, a thick vegetable soup built from whatever the garden or market offered. That was minestrone. No two batches were alike. Carrots, celery, zucchini, green beans, tomatoes, cabbage, potatoes all went into the pot, depending on the season and what was available. A woman started with a soffritto, diced onion, celery, and carrot sautéed in olive oil until soft and fragrant. She added chopped vegetables in stages, starting with the firmest, covered everything with water or broth, and let it simmer until the vegetables turned tender. Near the end, she stirred in small pasta shapes or cooked beans to make the soup more filling. Italian immigrants kept backyard gardens wherever space allowed, patches of tomatoes, peppers, basil, and zucchini growing behind tenement buildings and row houses across the city. The entire pot cost about 20 cents, $6 today. It stretched across multiple meals and tasted even better the second day. As a canned soup filled grocery shelves, and as Americans lost the habit of daily cooking, homemade minestrone became rare. But some soups served a more specific purpose, like the next dish, which appeared every time someone fell ill. Pastina in broth. Tiny star-shaped pasta cooked in chicken broth, sometimes enriched with a beaten egg and a spoonful of grated cheese. That was pastina. Mothers made it for children, for the elderly, for anyone recovering from illness. A woman brought homemade or canned broth to a simmer, stirred in the pastina, and cooked it until the tiny shapes turned tender, usually 5 to 6 minutes. Just before serving, she beat an egg in the bottom of each bowl, poured the hot soup over it, and stirred quickly so the egg formed ribbons rather than clumps. A sprinkle of grated Parmesan finished the dish. A box of pastina cost about 5 cents. A bowl of this soup cost under 10 cents total, around $3 today. As quick fix cold remedies and canned chicken soup dominated sick days, pastina in broth became a generational memory. The next dish also brought comfort, but it came from the oven, not the stovetop. Eggplant parmigiana, sliced eggplant breaded and fried, layered with tomato sauce and mozzarella, then baked until bubbling. That was eggplant parmigiana. In southern Italy, where meat was scarce, eggplant served as the centerpiece. A woman sliced the eggplant into rounds, salted them to draw out moisture, then patted each slice dry. She dredged each slice in flour, dipped it in egg, and coated it in breadcrumbs. She fried the slices in batches until golden, drained them on paper, then layered them in a baking dish with sauce, mozzarella, and parmesan. The dish baked until the cheese melted and browned. Did your family make this for special occasions or just weeknight suppers? A large eggplant cost about 4 cents. The entire dish ran under 30 cents, approximately $9 today. In America, chicken and veal versions eventually overshadowed the original vegetable dish, but in traditional Italian-American households, eggplant remained the standard. The next dish also featured breaded and fried protein, but this one came from the butcher shop. Veal cutlets Milanese. Thin veal cutlets, pounded flat, breaded with seasoned crumbs and pan-fried in butter until golden. That was cotoletta alla Milanese. Immigrants from northern Italy brought it to America, where inexpensive veal from dairy farms made it affordable for working families. A woman placed each cutlet between sheets of wax paper and pounded it thin with a meat mallet until it nearly doubled in size. She dredged the cutlets in flour, dipped them in beaten egg, and pressed them firmly into seasoned breadcrumbs. Each cutlet fried in a shallow pool of butter until both sides turned deep golden and the edges crisped. A pound of veal cutlets cost about 18 cents in 1910. A squeeze of lemon and a handful of parsley finished each serving. The total cost for 4 servings ran under 30 cents, around $9 today. As veal became expensive and animal welfare concerns grew, the dish largely disappeared from home kitchens. But not all Italian immigrant dinners required breading and frying. Some achieved their richness through long, slow braces. Pork chops with vinegar peppers, bone-in pork chops browned and then braised with sweet bell peppers preserved in vinegar. That was pork chops with vinegar peppers. The peppers, put up in late summer when they flooded the markets, added brightness and tang to the rich pork all winter. Long. A woman browned the chops on both sides in a heavy skillet until a golden crust formed, then set them aside. She added the sliced onions to the pan, let them soften in the rendered fat, then stirred in the jarred vinegar peppers along with their liquid. The chops went back in, the lid went on, and everything simmered until the pork turned tender and the sauce reduced to a glaze. Italian women preserved peppers, tomatoes, and other vegetables every August and September, filling pantry shelves with enough jars to last the winter. A pound of pork chops cost about 14 cents. A jar of home-canned peppers cost nearly nothing. The entire meal ran under 25 cents, around $7.50 today. As home canning declined and as boneless cuts replaced bone-in chops, this brace faded from weekly rotations. The next dish also relied on the pantry, but this one featured a protein that kept for months without refrigeration. Bacala with tomatoes and olives, salt-cured codfish soaked for days to remove the salt, then simmered with tomatoes, olives, and capers. That was bacala. It appeared on Christmas Eve, tables, and throughout Lent, when meat was forbidden. A woman soaked the stiff, dried fish in cold water for 2 to 3 days, changing the water several times each day to draw out the salt. Once rehydrated and pliable, she cut the fish into pieces, sautéed garlic in olive oil until fragrant, added crushed tomatoes, black olives, and capers, then nestled the fish into the sauce. The braise continued on low heat until the cod flaked easily with a fork. In 1920, Italian Americans consumed an estimated 3 million pounds of bacala annually, most of it during the Christmas season. A pound of dried salt cod cost about 15 cents. The entire dish ran under 30 cents, approximately $9 today. As fresh seafood became more available and as the strict observance of meatless Fridays declined, bacala fell out of favor. But Christmas Eve required more than fish. The next dish anchored the rest of the year. Lasagna, wide sheets of pasta, layered with meat sauce, ricotta, and mozzarella, then baked until the top blistered. That was lasagna. In America, the southern Italian version with tomato sauce and ricotta became standard. A woman made the pasta fresh or bought dried sheets from an Italian grocer. She spread sauce on the bottom of a deep baking pan, laid pasta sheets over it, spread ricotta, seasoned with egg and parsley, spooned more sauce over that, and sprinkled parmesan. She repeated the layers until the pan was full. Sliced mozzarella covered the top. The dish baked for 45 minutes to an hour. The pan rested 15 minutes before cutting. A full pan fed 8 to 10 people. The total cost ran about 50 cents in 1915, around $15 today. Did your grandmother use ricotta or bechamel in her lasagna? As frozen lasagna filled grocery, freezers, homemade versions declined. The next dish also layered pasta and cheese, but featured a filling few American children recognized: stuffed shells with spinach and ricotta, large conchiglie shells filled with ricotta, spinach, and parmesan, arranged in a baking dish, covered with sauce and baked. That was stuffed shells. The jumbo shells arrived in America already shaped, eliminating the need to roll and cut homemade pasta. A woman boiled the shells until just pliable, drained them carefully to avoid tearing, then piped or spooned, filling into each one. She spread sauce in a baking dish, arranged the filled shells open side up in neat rows, covered them with more sauce and sliced mozzarella, and baked until bubbling and golden. Frozen spinach, introduced in the 1930s, made the filling easier to prepare. Before that, women washed and wilted fresh bunches by the pound. A box of jumbo shells cost about 8 cents. A full pan ran under 40 cents, $12 today. As Italian restaurants added stuffed shells to their menus, home versions became reserved for holidays. But not every Italian immigrant dinner required a long bake. Some came together in a single pan. Sausage and peppers, sweet Italian sausage links, browned and then braised with sliced bell peppers and onions. That was sausage and peppers. Street vendors sold it at Italian festivals. Home cooks made it every week. A woman browned the sausage links in a wide skillet, turning them until the casings crisped on all sides and the fat rendered into the pan. She removed the sausages, added sliced onions and bell peppers to the rendered fat, and cooked them until soft and slightly caramelized. The sausages went back in, and everything simmered together until the flavors merged and the peppers turned silky. The dish appeared on Italian bread as a sandwich, over pasta, or alongside a mound of polenta. A pound of Italian sausage cost about 14 cents. The entire meal ran under 25 cents, around $7.50 today. As pre-made sausage patties replaced link sausage in American supermarkets, the traditional presentation declined. The next dish also came together quickly, but it relied on an ingredient many Americans had never tasted: pasta with broccoli, rabe, and garlic. Bitter broccoli rabe, blanched and then sautéed with garlic and crushed red pepper, tossed with orecchiette or penne. That was pasta with broccoli rabe. The vegetable, common in southern Italy, grew in Italian-American gardens across the northeast. A woman blanched the rabe in salted boiling water until just tender, then shocked it in cold water to stop the cooking and preserve the color. She sautéed sliced garlic in olive oil until fragrant, added the drained rabe, and tossed it with cooked pasta and a ladleful of the starchy cooking water to bring everything together. In the early 1900s, Italian vegetable vendors sold broccoli, rabe from push carts on city streets, years before it appeared in mainstream supermarkets. A bunch of broccoli rabe cost about 5 cents. The entire dish ran under 15 cents, approximately $4.50 today. As American-produced sections expanded to include broccoli rabe, the dish gained wider popularity. But the original home-cooked versions remain distinct. Did your grandparents grow broccoli rabe in their backyard garden. The next dish also featured a bitter vegetable, but this one simmered in soup rather than a skillet. Italian wedding soup. Tiny meatballs, escarole or spinach, and small pasta floating in a clear chicken broth. That was Italian wedding soup. Despite the name, it had nothing to do with weddings. The Italian phrase minestra maritata refers to the marriage of meat and greens. A woman mixed ground beef and pork with breadcrumbs, egg, and parmesan, then rolled the mixture into marble-sized meatballs. She browned them lightly in a skillet, then added them to a pot of simmering chicken broth, along with chopped greens and small pasta shapes like acini di pepe. The soup cooked until the pasta turned tender and the greens wilted into the broth. Each bowl required only a handful of meat, stretched by broth and vegetables into a complete meal. A pot of wedding soup for 6 cost about 25 cents, around $7.50 today. As canned soups and deli counters offered prepared versions, homemade wedding soup became a holiday tradition rather than a weekly staple. The next dish also featured meatballs, but these were served without any broth at all. Spaghetti and meatballs. Large meatballs made from ground beef, pork and veal, simmered in tomato sauce and served over spaghetti. That was the dish that came to define Italian-American cooking. In Italy, meatballs were small and served alone. In America, they grew larger and joined the pasta on the same plate. A woman mixed the ground meats with breadcrumbs soaked in milk, beaten egg, grated parmesan, minced garlic, and parsley. She shaped the mixture into bowls the size of small oranges, browned them in batches, then added them to simmering tomato sauce for at least an hour. A pound of mixed ground meat cost about 15 cents. A serving of spaghetti and meatballs ran under 20 cents, around $6 today. By 1950, spaghetti and meatballs had become the most recognizable Italian dish in America. As frozen meatballs filled freezer sections, homemade versions declined. The next dish shared the same sauce, but the meat took a different form. Pork ribs in Sunday gravy. Pork spare ribs, browned and braised for hours in tomato sauce, along with sausage and meatballs. That was Sunday gravy. The term gravy distinguished the meat-enriched sauce from plain marinara. A woman started early Sunday morning. She browned ribs in batches, then sausage links, then meatballs. Once all the meat was browned, she added garlic, poured in crushed tomatoes and a can of water. The meat went back in. The pot simmered for 3 to 4 hours while the family dressed for church. The meat flavored the sauce flavored the pasta. The ribs fell from the bone. Nothing went to waste. A pound of spare ribs cost about 10 cents. The entire pot ran under $1, approximately $30 today, but it fed a family of 8 for 2 days. A Sunday became a day for errands rather than cooking. All-day braces disappeared from most households. The next dish was the simplest of all, and often the last one standing when everything else faded from memory. Pasta, aglio e olio, spaghetti tossed with olive oil, sliced garlic and crushed red pepper. That was aglio e olio. No tomatoes, no meat, no cheese unless someone added it at the table. This was the dish of the cupboard, made when nothing else remained. A woman heated olive oil in a skillet, added thinly sliced garlic, and watched it carefully. The garlic needed to turn golden but not brown. Brown meant bitter. She tossed the hot oil with drained spaghetti, added pepper flakes, chopped parsley, and a ladle of starchy pasta water. The dish cost almost nothing. Under 10 cents for a family serving, around $3 today. In the tenements, aglio e olio proved that a meal did not require abundance. It required only technique, timing, and the knowledge passed from one generation to the next. By 1924, new immigration laws reduced the flow of Italians to a trickle. But the recipes they carried had already taken root in American soil. These 25 dishes did not arrive on passenger ships, in cookbooks or recipe cards. They came in the hands and memories of women who rebuilt their kitchens in a new country. They adapted, they substituted, they stretched ingredients across tables crowded with children and boarders and extended family. They turned cheap cuts into feasts and scraps into suppers. The coal stoves are gone now. The tenements have become condominiums. The pushcart markets have given way to supermarket aisles. But in kitchens across America, some version of these dishes still appears. On Sundays, on holidays, on the nights when nothing else will do. That is the story these recipes tell. Not just what Italian immigrants ate, but how they carried home with them. One pot, one brace, one slow Sunday, simmer at a time. Tap like and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter.